day 12 and we're at sea making our way up from Cadiz up to La Coruna, so we're just working our way up the coast of Portugal. Just been in touch with the family back home, and it's a bit sad really, because little Isabel, our little 2-year-old, she's feeling really poorly, so she's been sick in the night and she's got a really high temperature, so things aren't going too well back there. Gemma's holding the fort and she was gigging late last night, and then she was up all night with little Isabel being sick, so it's times like this when you feel really bad about being away and you just want to be at home helping out. That is one of the big downsides with working away, whether it's on a cruise ship or if you're in the military or any kind of job where you're away for long periods of time. Everything's fine, well, things run smoothly back home, but the minute that there's some problems, like people are ill or you might have relatives that die and things like that, and you're away, I mean, a number of times that can happen where, something like a parent dies or something like that, and you're in the middle of the Pacific and you can't get home. You've got to wait until you get to a port and then to fly home, or you might not even be able to fly home, depends on the situation. That side of it can be really, really tough. So we've just had something to eat, and in about half an hour I'm going to go up to the theatre and help Rob, our pianist, record a little demo or show reel of his playing and singing so that he can send that off to different people. So I'm going to help him out with that. Don't know if I'm going to go to the gym today. It's 4:05, so it's not too bad. I mean, it's nice weather outside, but the ship's rocking a little bit, and I hate being up in the gym when the thing's moving. One of the main questions people always ask about working on a cruise line is, do I get to travel? Well, the answer is kind of yes and no, or yes or no. A lot of it depends on what you're doing on board, and there's so many different variables in there. For a musician working on board, yes, you do get to travel and you do get to see a lot of the world most of the time. Now, if you're working in the theatre band as full-blown crew, you're going to be subject to a few more things like the import manning I talked about in one of the previous vlogs, where the ship needs a skeleton crew when they're in port, so there's a certain percentage of the crew stay on board in port, and people usually take turns doing that. But if you're working in a guest band, the kind of supernumerary kind of thing that I'm doing right now, then you're not subject to a lot of those things, so you can actually get off in any of the ports. Now, if you're not playing for a sail away, or you're not playing in the day, then yeah, you can just get off whenever the passengers do, and you can have all day out there and come back pretty much when the passengers do. So yeah, in that sense, it's very much like being a passenger. The actual number of places that you're going to see is very much going to be determined by the cruise line that you're on, or the ship that you're on. Different cruise lines concentrate in different areas, and they might have certain ships that are all posted out in certain areas. Some cruise lines have very varied itineraries on ships, and other cruise lines might have very repetitive ones. So for instance, you might get like a Royal Caribbean ship that just does the same run over and over again, and they might be 3 or 4 day cruises, just sailing out of a certain port, just going around a few Caribbean ports and back. Fred Olsen Cruise Lines is really good for varied itineraries. Like, we were on for like 3 years on here, and we didn't really do any repeats of the cruises. You might repeat certain ports at various points, but the actual itineraries themselves and the orders of all of those ports, that changed a lot. So if we use some of the English cruise lines as an example, so let's say P&O, the cruise ships that they've got, their itineraries are going to be divided up into seasons. So during the summer months, the cruise ships are going to be sailing out of Southampton, and they're either going to be going down to the Med, or they might go down to the Canary Islands, or they might go up to Norway. I mean, there's variations on that, but that's that one season. So they'll generally sail out of Southampton and just wherever they can go within a 2-week radius. Then during the winter months, those ships will usually migrate over to the Caribbean and stay there from, let's say, October through to maybe March the following year. So that's the Caribbean season. And if you're working on there, often as a musician, you might stay on for the whole Caribbean season. If you're on a ship that does world cruises, that'll change things a little bit. So it'll still do the standard season sailing out of, let's say, Southampton through the summer, but then the winter months it'll probably stay in England and still do maybe the Canary Islands, something like that, the odd Caribbean cruise working across the Atlantic and coming back. But then in January it'll do a full world cruise and go all the way around, and generally they'll want you to stay on for the whole world cruise. Over the years, because I've usually worked for P&O cruises, I've either been on ships that have done Caribbean seasons or world cruises, and I've done both, probably in equal measure. Back when I first started, the Caribbean itineraries used to be a little bit more varied, used to do a lot of different islands, but these days they tend to do repeats, so they'll have Barbados as a main turnaround port, and you'll just go around the same set of islands time and time again, with the odd variation. World cruises are usually pretty varied in terms of the itinerary because, you know, you're going a long way and there's a lot of different ports to choose from on the way. There'll usually be a few ports that you always call at, like Singapore or maybe Sydney, or, you know, transiting the Panama Canal, those kind of things. But around those key ports, you're generally going to get quite a bit of variation. So, yeah, the world cruises can be really good for traveling and, you know, seeing the world. So, to the question of do you get to see the world when you're working on a cruise ship, I would say from my experience, yes, definitely. I've seen so many places that I would just have never seen if I'd have never done this job. I've seen so many things like, you know, I've been to the pyramids, the Great Wall of China, Petra in Jordan, been around the whole of South America, quite a bit of time in Australia and New Zealand, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, done quite a bit of Alaska, done a lot of the ports around America and then up through Canada, you know, Montreal, Quebec, all around there. I love all the South Pacific islands like Bora Bora and Tahiti. Been around the whole of Africa and spent 3 days on safari in Kenya. Get to do the colder places up in the Arctic like Iceland, Spitsbergen, all the Scandinavian countries. And then there's all the obvious places in the Mediterranean and the Canary Islands. So yeah, I'd say the travelling's been pretty good. We've got a stowaway.